So, since I'm ignorant, I got the luck to discover Descartes. I mean, I knew who Descartes was, but I read him after I read you, and I noticed he gives you the tools to doubt what he's saying. It's like the opposite of dogmatism.
I mean, that, ought to be the ideal of teaching anyway. Whether it's children or graduate students, they should be taught to challenge and to question images that come from the Enlightenment about this, that say that teaching should not be like pouring water into a vessel. It should be like laying out a string along which the student travels in his or her own way, and maybe even questioning whether the string's in the right place. And, after all, that's how modern science started. For thousands of years, it was accepted by scientists that objects move to their natural place. So a ball goes to the ground and steam goes to the sky. These things are kind of like common sense, and they were taken for granted for literally thousands of years from Aristotle. And it wasn't until Galileo and the modern scientific revolution that scientists decided to be puzzled by these obvious things. And as soon as you start to question things, you see nothing like that makes any sense. And every stage of science, or even just learning, serious learning, comes from asking, why do things work like that? Why not some other way? All right, you find that the world is a very puzzling place. And if you're willing to be puzzled, you can learn. If you're not willing to be puzzled and just copy down what you're told or behave the way you're taught, you just become a replica of someone else's mind. Some of the technical work I'm doing now is initiated by my suddenly realizing that assumptions that have been standard throughout modern history of generative grammar, but in fact throughout the traditional study of language, just have no basis. And when we ask, okay, then why do we assume them? You have to look for a basis. Then lots of avenues open up. And that happens constantly.
And do you remember when you start to build your own voice or your own philosophy in a way? And could you describe how this process happened?
It's a constant process. It probably starts with my not wanting to eat my oatmeal. Why? And in any kind of scientific inquiry, any kind of rational inquiry, it's striking in science. You have a conception of how things ought to work. If you look at the empirical data, they're usually at least partially recalcitrant. Things don't fall into place. So you typically are working with a conflict between a conception of the way things ought to work in terms of elegance, simplicity, naturalness, and a look at the messy way in which things do seem to work. The Galilean revolution, which was a real revolution in the way of looking at the world, for one thing, because of the willingness to be puzzled about what seemed to be simple things. It's a hard move to make. In the case I mentioned, it was 2,000 years, smart people.
Yeah.